Hey everyone, welcome to this special comedy edition of Live in the Sunroom. Today we're talking to stand-up comic Steve Trevino.
Dad, have you seen my pretzels?
Mom, I'm doing my Facebook thing.
Are you sure you haven't seen my pretzels?
No, I haven't seen your pretzels. Anyway, today we're talking to stand-up comic Steve Trevino, who's performing this week at the Comic Strip.
I'll tell you this story. I bought a house. People tell you that when you make money, you should get into real estate. So I did. They say you can't go wrong. Yeah, you can.
So Steve, stand-up comedy has made a huge comeback in recent years. What's it been like to be part of that renaissance?
Well, you know, it's funny that you say that, right? That there's this big resurgence of it. And you know what? It's really cool. And I also believe that we're at a time now where comedy kind of did this little wave. And the comedians that were kind of your notebook joke-telling comedians has kind of moved away, and now we're getting into the Bill Burrs and the Doug Stanhopes and Louis C.K., the guys that are more real and the more honest and more...
Almost philosophical, really, right?
Right, more opinionated. Yeah. So, you know, and what I do, I talk about my life, my wife, and my take on my frustration with being married, but it's all very, very honest. So it is exciting that people are getting into comedy in a very different way now. You know, like they come to my shows and they go, "Oh, how's your wife?" You know what I mean? Yeah. And you know, I did a special on Showtime about my dad, and I call him Grandpa Joe. So they go, "Well, how's Grandpa Joe?" You know, or I'll put a picture on my Facebook fan page of my dad, and people go, "Oh, is this Grandpa Joe?" Yeah. Oh, I wanted to put a name with the face. So the honesty of it, I think, is what is bringing comedy back, in my opinion. You know what I mean?
Well, speaking of honesty, you're a Texas guy. You grew up in Corpus Christi. How do you incorporate your background without delving into cliches?
Well, by just being me, right?
Okay.
By just being on stage and being me and being honest to myself, to who I am, right? And I live in California now. I've got a place in Texas, but my main residence is in LA at the moment. But you know, it's frustrating when somebody goes, "You're a Chicano." And I'm like, no, I'm not a Chicano, I'm a Tejano. And people go, "Well, what's the difference?" I'm like, well, Texas and California are very different. You know what I mean? So, and you lived in LA. Yeah. So the Mexican-American culture there is different than the Mexican-American culture. You know, George Lopez made it and wanted a lowrider. I made it and I want a pickup truck. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's just by being honest and being, you know, exactly who I am. But I also feel for Mexican Americans that there needs to be a change, and I hope to be that change. Does that make sense?
Explain that. What do you mean?
I think that you know that George Lopez is our parents' comedian. You know, I think, and as great as George is, right? George is very funny. But I put it to you this way: if black people only had Cat Williams as their stand-up comedian representative, they wouldn't be happy with that. Because they would go, "Hey, not all of us are like Cat Williams." Got it. You know, they have Chris Rock and Kevin Hart and Eddie Murphy and Richard Pryor, and we can go on for days. We have George, right? Yeah. So there needs to be the next generation of that. You know, like myself, for example, I don't go on stage and point out the differences of being Latino versus being white. You know, and George does a lot of, well, you know how we are. Sure. You know how raza is. You know, and to me, in my opinion, I think that as an American group of people, the American Latino, I think we've changed, and we want to see us represented in a way that is just like, I spend a lot of time explaining how much the same we are, and George Lopez spends a lot of time explaining how different we are. And I think as Mexican Americans, we want to get to the point where we go, "Hey, we're just people like you. We're just Americans of Mexican descent." So I'm hoping to change that, you know, and I don't do punchlines in Spanish. You know, I don't want to alienate anybody. My fans, believe it or not, are all over the world. I have 500,000 followers on my fan page, and when I break it down, it's Singapore, it's Australia, it's all over Canada, all over the US. Wow. You know, I'm a true crossover where somebody in Birmingham, Alabama, where I sell out, of all places, right? People come out and I sell out and it's 90% white. But I don't change the fact that, my last name is Trevino. Right. I don't say hey guys, Steve Trevino. I go, hey man, I'm Steve Trevino, and I'm very, you know what I mean? Yeah. I don't hide from I'm not embarrassed. I don't hide from being Latino. I represent us in a way that is proud, and I'm hoping that catches on. And it seems to be. It seems to be catching on. And I hope that there's Mexican Americans in this country that feel the same way I do. And feel like, hey, Steve, we're on board, man. We get what you're doing, and we understand where you're going with it. And I think it is. I think it's starting to catch on. And believe me, for years I was like, maybe I need to do some taco jokes, man. You know what I mean?
That's the temptation.
Yeah.
Right?
Abuelita's house.
Yeah.
Hijo de su. You know what I mean? So, it's. I'm hoping to make that movement.
So, Steve, what is the role of the comedian, in your opinion?
To be honest, and to put a mirror up against life. I think that being a comedian means that you are a social commentator, that you put a mirror in front of people and go, hey, look, this is funny. I make jokes about me and my wife almost getting a divorce, and people laugh because I put a mirror up to them and they get to go, oh man, it's not just me. Yeah. I do a joke where I go, about every 4 months, me and my wife almost get a divorce. And then a few minutes later, we get hungry, and it's like, you want to go eat or what? but you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's a mirror to my life that people get to go, oh, look, that's my favorite part about being on stage is when I see couples in the audience go, nudging their partner going, oh my God, that's so us. And
well, I think that's what comedy does best, right? Is when it reminds us that we all go through these experiences, and it gives voice to some of those insecurities.
Right. Well, and what you just said right there, insecurities, right? Yeah. Like being able to put a mirror on it, like you said, and go, hey man, I'm just like you, but as a comedian, I'm willing to come out and say it. I used to do a joke where I go, how did it go? Oh, I'm fat and confident, right? I'm chubby and confident, right? I go, if I'm walking against the wind, I don't care. I keep walking, right? But something like that where people go, oh my God, because you do that thing, right? Yeah. But it's little stuff like that. And I've never had any shame. I've always just been very honest. And I think that my honesty and my act too, I truly love my wife. And I think that because I truly love my wife, that comes across. That even though I'm frustrated with her, even though sometimes I want to kill her, you know what I mean? Yeah. But he loves her. And the reason he puts up with this crap is because he loves her. So I think the job of, I get very frustrated when I see comedians with their little notebook, and they're trying to make up jokes, like, oh, I should write a joke about that lamp. Yeah, yeah. See, that to me it's not what it is to be a stand-up comedian. It is telling jokes. It is maybe being a comic, you know what I mean? Writing funny jokes, but to be a comedian, you look at somebody like Chris Rock, who is very honest and very, he puts a mirror up against society. Sure. I put a mirror up against my relationship. He puts a mirror up against society. So I think the definition of being a comedian is to be completely honest and open and say something that matters.
I was even being smart. I bought a house with the house behind the house to rent the house behind the house to help me pay for the house.
All right, Steve, so what can people expect this week at the Comic Strip? You're doing several nights.
Well, they can expect to laugh 100%. Right, I can promise you that you will laugh. But, man, you know what? I do a two-man show. The comedian I bring with me, Kyle Ray, is hilarious. He does 25 to 30 minutes up front. And then I do an hour and 15, which is rare for a headliner. Usually there's an opener that does 15, the middle act does 30, and then the headliner usually does about 45 minutes. But I kind of like to be on stage, right? So I end up doing like about an hour and 15. So it's a long, really good show. And especially if you're married, gonna be married, been divorced, it's a show for you. Like I said, you end up nudging your wife or husband and go, oh my God, that's us. You know what I mean? Yeah. But you can expect an honest and fun show.
My last question here is, What's your favorite joke? I mean, that might be hard. That might be your joke. It might be someone else's joke. I don't know. What's made you laugh as a bit, a joke?
I'll tell you why this is my favorite joke. I come from a funny family, right? You're obviously artistic. Probably a lot of people in your family were probably outspoken and artistic artistic, right? But it's funny too. And I always tell my relatives, they get mad at me, right? Because they go, "Well, I'm funny." I'm like, "Yeah, but I was the only smart one to go make a living doing it, right?" Well, one of my aunts, God rest her soul, she's dead now, died of alcoholism, right? And we would sit at a table like me and you are. The only difference is we'd have a little ice chest and the little radio, and we would just drink, me and her, and have some laughs, right? And we would go back and forth telling jokes. I mean, she'd tell me a joke. When I say joke, I mean
standard stuff.
Standard, like everybody knows, right? Well, I would tell her this joke, and I'm not kidding you. I could tell it once, and then she'll tell me 2 jokes, and I'll tell her one, and then she'll go, "Tell me that one again." Like, that's how funny it was. So, and I miss her laugh, so I always think of this joke. A man walks in to his bedroom. His wife is laying on the bed. Underneath his arm, he has a sheep. And he says, "Hey, this is the sheep," or I'm sorry, he goes, "This is the pig I've been sleeping with." And the wife goes, "Hey, stupid, that's not a pig, that's a sheep." He goes, "I wasn't talking to you." Dude, every time I would lose it, man. And my aunt, she was a smoker, so she'd be there. She'd be like dying, turning red. And I'm like, "Diana, are you okay?" But that's one of my favorite jokes. And when you start off as a comedian, you're funny already, but you don't know that you're supposed to be doing original material.
Yeah.
I would memorize all these jokes when I was a kid, and then my dad's friends would be like, "Come here, man, Steve knows a million." And I'd be at the barbecue or the backyard cookout or whatever, and my dad would be like, "Hey, tell him jokes." So, man, I'd bark off, 20 jokes.
Yeah.
And people would be like, "How does this 9-year-old remember these?"
Wow.
And that's where it all started, in the backyard, just making I remember being so small that my dad would stand me up on the picnic table, and all my uncles would be there. And at that point, I had memorized Eddie Murphy Raw. Remember that?
Which probably wasn't appropriate
for a 9-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And my mom would have come outside, "Oh my God, what's happening?" And all the men would be like, "Ah!" Yeah, I mean, they'd be dying, And I think that was the beginning of me going, "Man, I like this," And I mean, I don't know about your dad and your uncles and your cousins, but those guys were all tough guys, and very macho, and drank beer and wore boots, and you know what I mean, and worked for a living. So to be able to make these men laugh, to me, was just such a huge power almost, where you go, "Man, I'm making the toughest dudes I know fall on the ground." I mean, I had uncles that were on the ground, laughing so hard, and I think that was what was attractive to me. And man, I turned 19 years old after I graduated high school, and my cousin called me. He goes, "Hey man, I need a roommate. I live in Dallas, and I live across the street from a comedy club." And I said, "I'm on my way."
And that's where it started.
That's it, man. I got there on a Tuesday. I was on stage on a Wednesday. 2 years later, I'm on the Three Amigos tour with Freddie Soto and Carlos Mencia and Pablo Francisco, and haven't had a job since. So it's working out somehow.
Well,
you know what I mean?
glad.
Dude, thanks for having me,
glad,
man. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, Steve.